Today's episode is brought to you by HERdacity. HERdacity is a nonprofit inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. For resources, networking opportunities, and a strong community of women, visit HERdacity.org to learn more.
Welcome to HERdacous, a podcast for audacious women. Welcome to HERdacous, the podcast for audacious women looking to make some career moves and utilizing HERdacous to help you do so. My name's Lorelei, and I'm the happy host of the show, and today we're going to be talking about inclusive behaviors and language in the workplace. And joining me today, I have a founding member and former national co-chair of the human rights campaign Parents for Transgender Equality Council, an activist, a writer, a speaker, and a mama bear, Amber Briggle.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today. I'm super excited to talk about this.
I, too, am excited to have you here. This is going to be an epic conversation. To get us started, please share with our listeners why you are so passionate about inclusivity in the workplace and beyond.
So I am the parent of two children, one of whom is transgender. His name is Max, and he transitioned halfway through first grade. That was back in early 2015, seems like 100 years ago, before hardly anyone was talking about the transgender community, let alone transgender children. So this was before Jazz Jennings, a very famous young transgender woman. She has a hit reality TV show called I Am Jazz. This was way before her show. This is before we have any of the conversations that we're having today in our society. And so I was just kind of winging it. So I didn't go to school for this. I don't work in corporate America, but I am the parent of a young transgender boy. He's now 13. And I'm also a small business owner.
Excellent. So with inclusivity being a personal and professional mission and passion for you, what types of advocacy work do you participate in?
Yeah. So, I'm kind of a freelancer, right? So I was a founding member of the human rights campaign's Parents for Transgender Equality Council. It's a fantastic group of some amazing leaders from across the country. They're still in existence and doing some truly tremendous things. So I was a founding member and served with them for about 3 years. But I just kind of do what I have to do as a mom and as a small business owner. So sometimes that will mean presenting at a local conference. I've done a TEDx talk. I've written some things both at the local and at the national level for different publications. I also volunteer in my Chamber of Commerce. We just recently instituted a DEI committee, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I was really excited when I saw that, because I think we definitely need more leadership in chambers of commerce. We need more leadership in boardrooms. We need more diversity in that leadership. So I was very excited to sign up for that. So I go where I'm needed, basically. Yeah.
Love that. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to be talking about inclusive behaviors in the workplace. So what does inclusive behavior really boil down to for us working folks?
I think I look at it from, kind of two aspects. One is I want to make sure that my employees and my team feel equal, feel that they're being treated fairly, that they have equal opportunities in my business. But I also want to make sure that our clients feel that this is a safe and welcoming space. Specifically, I run a massage studio. And when it's already kind of a vulnerable place to be, because you're going in and literally getting naked for a stranger. And so it's already it's a very vulnerable sort of feeling. And then when you add to the top of that, feelings of, we certainly don't want to misgender anyone. We don't want to trigger anyone by calling them by the wrong name. We don't want to be just saying just the slightest wrong word, or having even just our bathroom signs, making sure that we're using the word menstrual products instead of feminine products. You know what I mean? Just really being very mindful of all the ways that I can help people feel safe and welcome and protected in my business. I think it takes on a lot of different aspects, and you can look at it from a very, small example, like what I use with my bathroom signs, and blow it way on up to, like I said before, leadership in your boardrooms. So I think it can take on lots of different aspects depending on the size of your company and what it is that you do to engage with the public.
Well, you mentioned a few examples a moment ago. Can you share some more behavioral specifics around inclusive practices?
Let's start with pronouns. I think it would be very beneficial and very helpful if we could just all walk around with pronoun pins. Just really normalize introducing yourself with your pronouns. I saw that you put it in your email signature. I put it in mine as well. Maybe encouraging your front desk staff to wear pronoun pins, especially if you work in a forward-facing environment, such as like maybe medical. I think it's important not to assume that someone is partnered. And when you find out that they're partnered, don't assume that their partner is of the opposite sex, right? So using inclusive language around, partners, spouses, single people, making sure that everyone is feeling included. As I said in the beginning too, even in my bathrooms, we don't have a sign, like we don't want people to flush tampons down the toilet, right? So we say, but instead of saying like, please don't flush feminine products, we say menstrual products, because transgender men and non-binary people can be menstruating people too, right? I think also it's important. I'm thinking really also more like in the medical offices, making sure that your lobbies showcase the diversity of your patients.
Like in marketing collateral, like your pictures you see on the wall?
Yeah, exactly. Having children's books that have, two dads, having pictures of racially diverse families. I think that's just showing the diversity, I think can really signal to someone that you are an ally and that your studio and your business is a safe space to be. And I think, also just kind of riffing, I think maybe like your receptionist desk, or like maybe you could have some literature in your bathroom, for like an affirming like counseling office or resources for LGBTQ youth, right? Like it doesn't have, like you don't have to, I'm not saying you have to like, hire a painter to like, blow up your logo in rainbows, every June. But there's even like little things that you can do on a day-to-day basis that show that you are aware that diversity and inclusion is very important to not only your staff, but your clients and customers as well.
Well, something we do on a day-to-day basis is speak, usually, for those of us who have that ability. So let's talk about inclusive language. Give us a few examples. You already gave us one with the menstrual products, not feminine products. You got some more?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we understand our world based on the words that we use, right? Like, I mean, that is how we define our world and help us understand who we are and our place in it. So, I mean, it really boils down to language. I started, the last question by answering about pronouns, right? It's all about language. So, maybe instead of saying like, hey guys, hey y'all, hello friends. If you work in a school, instead of saying boys and girls, call them scholars or students or children, or friends, something more gender inclusive, and remembering too that gender is not a binary. So, when you're saying things like even Disney, for example, they changed their opening welcome from their nightly fireworks show. They used to say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dreamers of all ages, right? That doesn't really include everyone, because what about genderqueer or non-binary people, right? So they cut out the whole binary thing and they just say, welcome dreamers of all ages, right? So
nice.
I think, you could review your documentation when your intake forms. Of course, I'm again speaking as someone who runs a massage studio. Like, do you really need to know a person's gender? And do you need to know their gender, or do you need to know their sex? Like, those are different things, and they don't always align. Like, for myself as a massage therapist, like, I don't need to know what your gender identity is. I need to know where your pain is. Like, let's talk about your sciatica. Like, that's valid information, right? Do you have a place for pronouns on your intake forms? And do you have a place where someone can, and more than just, he versus she, right? Like, who could we maybe diversify even the way that people answer that?
Right.
I think, I've been being the parent of a transgender child. I've seen this in the medical field. Those forms are super outdated, and they always just blame it on corporate. but I mean, they have a lot more sway in changing those forms than I do just as one single person. So I think advocating for making sure that those forms, both online and on paper, are reflect, again, the diversity of your patients.
Well, you talked about corporate. I mean, Disney is one of the largest corporations of all. And if they can make some changes to their opening welcome at a nightly event that they host, I mean, come on, we can change some paperwork.
Absolutely. I haven't had a whole lot of issues with my son seeing doctors, but I have had issues with their front desk staff using the wrong name because these are medical records, right? Using the wrong pronouns, even though it's very clear that he's a boy. It may not even be intentional for them. There just may not be a place on their online form for, these are the pronouns that this child uses, right? Like they're seeing his birth name and might be using female pronouns, right? Thinking that they're being helpful when they're really not, right? So I think training your front desk staff on these inclusive behaviors can go a really long way because, again, they are the first people that we see. So we want to feel welcomed there too. So I think also we as Texans, we see it's a lot of sir and ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. We don't need to do that. I'm from the North Country. Northerners don't do that. And we're able to communicate just fine. If you need a follow-up, you'd be like, yes, please. No, thank you. But it doesn't, don't assume, again, someone's gender identity when you're speaking on a phone. I mean, you could be a transgender woman with a very deep voice and vice versa. So just knock it off. We don't have, it's just irrelevant. We don't need that anymore. I think, your restroom signs, and we could certainly change those. I don't need my gender to pee. I just need a toilet. So we could have a sign, one that says toilets and one that says urinals, right? And I think too, again, talking about language, I'm going to call myself out here on this one. I was reviewing my website because we recently expanded. And so I feel like that needs a new website, to kind of polishing it up. And I was going through and I was reading my section on prenatal massage, and I kept using the words pregnant mother or mother and baby. And what I know now that I didn't know then when I designed my website is that it's not just cisgender women who get pregnant. Non-binary people and transgender men actually have babies quite frequently. So I changed the language just to the pregnant client. Keeping in mind, too, that pregnant parent might not even be the best way to say that because it might be a surrogate, right? So I think, just reviewing everything that is facing out to the public, that is the first thing that people see. And if you want to show yourself as being an inclusive environment, it all boils down to language. So do some self-evaluation, look around your studio, look around your business, look at your bathroom signs, look at your website, and find ways that you can improve that.
Well, digging a little deeper into reviewing internal documents and outward-facing content, we could talk about workplace policies for a second. Do you have a few examples of inclusive workplace policies that we could start pondering on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So let's start with maternity leave, right? Again, that's a gendered word. We don't need to use it. And it's not just mothers who need to take really what's essentially parental leave. I'm very fortunate. My partner is a super hands-on dad. We're very privileged. When I had my babies, he had a job where he could, work from home. And this was, pre-pandemic. He also had a job where he could just kind of, he could duck out, for a couple of days if I needed some support. I would have loved to have had him there all the time. And I think he would have loved to have been there with his newborns as well. So I think changing not only the language from maternity leave to parental leave, but then also making sure that that it's not just the moms who get it, and also it's not just parents who just recently gave birth. Like what if you're adopting?
Right. What about the surrogacy you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. You need time to recover from if you're a surrogate, and you need time to bond with your children if you're adoptive parents. So I think that would be a really great workplace policy. I would love to see that everyone everyone start right away. I think finding a dedicated space that's not just a bathroom for chest feeding parents. I wouldn't say breastfeeding mothers, because again, that's gendered. For chest feeding parents to pump, not a bathroom. Like, that's gross. Like, I don't want to have lunch in a bathroom. I don't think we should expect babies to have their lunch prepared there either. So that would be fantastic. I think reviewing your healthcare policies. I bump into this a lot as a parent of a transgender child. If a cisgender person is able to access healthcare, be it surgeries, procedures, hormones, medications, whatever it is, that a transgender person is not able to access and they're on the same plan. That is, quite frankly, discriminatory, right? There's cisgender women who need estrogen. There's cisgender men who need testosterone. Like, why can trans men not access testosterone as well, right? There are breast cancer survivors who need breast augmentation surgery. Like, why are cisgender women cut out of that as well, right? Like, these are medically prescribed best practices procedures that their physicians are prescribing for them, and they absolutely need equal access to these, just full stop. Lastly, it's really important to remember that there are now workforce protections for LGBTQ employees. So the Supreme Court ruled on a case, I believe it was last summer, Ostock versus Clayton County, which basically said you cannot discriminate against someone in the workplace based on their gender identity or their sexual orientation. That is extremely important to remember. It's important to train your HR, your management, people at all levels to understand that this is illegal. It is un-American, it's un-Texan, and it does not fit the values of, quite frankly, any successful business out there. It's really important to remember that there are legal protections, federal legal protections for your LGBTQ employees. And so advocating for your colleagues anytime you can is incredibly important. And it shows that you're really conscious of creating a more inclusive work environment, which benefits, quite frankly, everyone.
Excellent. And to benefit this show, we're going to take a brief sponsor break. We'll be right back.
Hi, Barbie here from Moonray, husband and wife indie pop duo. If you enjoy the intro music, we invite you to listen to our debut EP, Honeymoon, streaming now on all platforms. Visit www.moonray-music.com for more.
And we're back talking with Amber Briggle about inclusive workplace practices. Amber, many of us have some sort of ability to influence our workplace policies. How might we go about that sort of internal advocacy?
Absolutely. So let's start with bigger companies. A lot of mid to large size companies will have what are called ERGs, or employee resource groups. You could start or join an LGBTQ ERG within your company, which will help you advocate for that change internally, for sure. There's power in numbers. Smaller companies, defending, really any company of any size, defending and advocating, for your LGBTQ friends, even when they're not in the room. So if someone is misgendered, or what we would say dead named, right? Correct that person who used that and challenge them to do better. So you're creating a culture of allyship and safety. You're creating that culture, which is then going to permeate the entire organization. Talk to HR about how employees are categorized in the system, right? So we're going back to those intake forms for your clients and patients, the way how even your colleagues and employees are categorized in the system. Do you need to know male and female? Are there more options for that? And what happens too when someone does transition in the workplace? Are there gender transition guidelines with supportive restroom and dress code and documentation guidance? That's all really critical, very, very important. Basically, what fields are absolutely necessary on your intake forms and which ones are not? Again, it all goes back to language. I know it seems small, but words absolutely have power.
Help us make the economic case for inclusion in the workplace, because I know that you know that it impacts the bottom line.
It absolutely affects the bottom line, and it literally costs nothing to be kind to people, to all people, and to treat them fairly in the workplace. Costs you $0, but discrimination absolutely has a huge cost. So these numbers were taken from Texas Competes. It's a fantastic organization that I encourage every business, large and small, to join. But from Texas Competes, they have on their website, basically, if Texas passed a non-discrimination law similar to other states that would protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations, it would create 180,000 new tech and tourism jobs by 2025 and 702,000 new jobs by 2045. That is tremendous. $1.2 billion annually in state revenue from 2021 to 2025 and $900 million in annual local government revenue. That would be huge for local governments everywhere. $900 million annually for them. Also from Texas Competes, there'd be increased business activity, obviously, because when you have a statewide act that protects your employees, it also protects their spouses, their partners, their transgender children like mine. You don't want to move to a state where you feel that you or someone you love could be harmed by the government. So you're just not going to even apply for that job, which makes a smaller pool of candidates, and less economic activity for sure. Just as an example, when North Carolina passed their bathroom bill, they hemorrhaged money. Again, from a 2017 AP analysis showed that they lost $3.76 billion.
Billion with a B.
$6 billion in economic losses. And I think, these laws don't even have to pass in order for them to have the economic damage, right? Because these conferences, they plan years out, right? And so if it's even, a possibility that your state could pass a discriminatory law, then those conferences and conventions are going to look elsewhere. Just in 2017, when Texas was trying, thank goodness unsuccessfully, to pass a bathroom bill, Texas lost $66 million in meetings and conventions just over that debate. And remember, that bill didn't even pass. I mean, the loss could have been exponentially higher.
Good call out.
A lot of this data can be found at texascompetes.org. I really encourage everyone to look that up and also sign your business and your organization up. They're a fantastic resource because, discrimination is just bad for business, plain and simple.
Thank you for that. So we are recording this episode in July of 2021. So naturally, we just came out of the month of June, Pride Month, where we saw lots of those rainbow logos, as you mentioned before, and lots of rainbow marketing efforts. How can companies show up for the LGBTQ community the other 11 months of the year?
Oh, it's so important. Thank you for asking this question. I think it's shameful when businesses are all about, yay, we love LGBTQ people. And then in July, they're like, okay, moving on. I mean, there were over 30 anti-LGBTQ bills filed in Texas in the regular session. It's maybe when we're recording this, it's like we're 1 week into the special session and 15 anti-transgender bills have been filed in the special session. And I have heard nary a peep from the business community. In 2017, it was the business community that really stood up and spoke out loudly against those bathroom bills. And that was a large part about why they failed. It was, quite frankly, discrimination is bad for business. Where are those businesses today? It's just a different vibe, and we need businesses to advocate for your employees and your customers every day out of the year, not just in June.
To reiterate, discrimination is bad for business. What can we do? What can folks do at their small businesses, at their nonprofits, within their larger organizations to create more inclusive, more fair, more equitable practices for our LGBTQ colleagues and customers?
Absolutely. So we've touched on a lot on this already. So it's language in the workplace, it's HR policies, it's access to healthcare. I think using your position as a business owner, small or large size. I mean, it's important to remember small businesses, we can do a lot to support the LGBTQ community. We create 1.5 million jobs annually and represent 95% of all companies in this country. So just because you're a small business owner doesn't mean that you don't have a voice. So use your place as a business owner of any size to write or contact your elected officials. Push for things like local NDOs, non-discrimination ordinances. Push for things like the Equality Act to be a federal act that would protect, it would enshrine these protections in perpetuity for the LGBTQ community. Lobby your Chamber of Commerce. Chambers of Commerce have huge sway when it comes to speaking to their elected officials. So lobby them to get involved and show them this data from Texas Competes that it's important for them to speak up because it's good for business when we're good to all people. Join an organization like Texas Competes, like I said, changing your bathroom signs, lobby your city council. There are literally a million things that businesses of any size can do to make the world a better place.
Excellent, excellent. I appreciate you advocating for us to get creative, to be more inclusive. So lastly, share some resources that our listeners can follow up with to continue their learning journeys on building inclusive behaviors.
Yeah, sure. So I've already mentioned Texas Competes a million times because I'm a super hardcore fan of what they're doing. Also a woman-led organization. So definitely sign up. It's texascompetes.org. And the Human Rights Campaign has what they call a corporate equality index. You likely have heard of this. Different companies will score different grades based on their inclusive benefits or their workforce protections or whether or not they support an inclusive culture, whatnot. So you can look at what the corporate equality index measures and see if you can implement some of those practices and policies into your business. Again, large or small, it might be a good kind of jumping off point. If you're wondering where to begin, look at what HRC is measuring and see if you can match that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this, Amber.
Absolutely.
Well, in our final segment of the show, the Femme Fact, I would like to share that the writer of most of these wonderful pieces of history or news is HERdacity's own Claudia Ng. And her Achilles heel of women's historical fun facts are warrior women. So in this episode's Femme Fact, we're going back to pre-modern Japan, where an entourage of highly skilled female exclusive warriors were not only commonplace, but deeply honored. Long, long ago, around 200 CE, legend has it that the 14th Emperor of Japan, Emperor Chuhai, died in battle in his attempt to invade what is now known as Korea. It is said that his wife, the legendary Empress Jingu, enraged at the loss of him, sought vengeance for her husband's death, and rallied an army and sailed/marched to what we now know as Korea, where she avenged her husband by slaughtering his former opponents in a multi-year war. Empress Jingu thereafter became the first recorded Japanese empress to lead a foreign invasion, and also became known as an Onna-Bugeisha. In Japan, warrior women have a special title. As I mentioned a moment ago, they are known as Onna-Bugeisha or Onna-Bugeisha. The Onna-Bugeisha and the Onna-Bugeisha were women combat fighters modeled after the male samurai, whom they collaborated with during wartime. Diving into semantics for just a moment, the Onna-Bugeisha consisted of women who specialized in defensive combat. They trained to use a weapon specifically designed for women, called a naginata. While the women of the Onna-Bugeisha specialized in offensive combat, they were trained in martial arts, weapon wielding, and were especially well-versed in the art of knife fighting, known as tanto jutsu. Nevertheless, both terms essentially translate to warrior women, and long story short, they both really slayed at their jobs. Wink, wink. Even though the Onna-Bugeisha were women, feudal Japan considered them to be part of the bushi, or samurai class in medieval Japan. The bushi were hallmarked by a few important characteristics that the Onna-Bugeisha shared. For instance, the members were of inherited military rank and stature. So in the US, you might call this a military brat, except that you did join the military later, aka the samurai. The Onna-Bugeisha were well paid, think like doctor, lawyer, engineer levels, and they were regarded as an elite warrior class, which allowed for special privileges, like being able to carry 2 swords in public, responsibly, of course. Now, this might be surprising to some as modern-day Japan regards domesticity as a woman's central role, which can be argued to be a relatively recent occurrence, because no such view existed amid the origins of the Onna-Bugeisha. Just like the samurai, the Onna-Bugeisha had an inherent duty to protect their families, their land, and their nation. One of the most famous and one of the last warrior women in Japanese history was Nakano Takeko, who unfortunately was on the receiving end of these changing attitudes. Nakano was an Onna-Bugeisha warrior who frequently commanded the front lines of defense. However, in the mid-1860s, the Meiji imperial family sought power over the Tokugawa clan, and civil war ensued. Wanting to fight in favor of the Tokugawa clan, Nakano enlisted in the Aizu army, but was banned from active duty due to her gender. She responded to the formal dismissal by creating her own army of female warriors called the Aizu Joshitai. During the Battle of Aizu, Nakano led her unofficial women's-only troop to the front lines, despite the use of firearms in this battle. Nakano is said to have taken down 5 or 6 enemy soldiers before taking a fatal shot to the chest. During her last moments of life, it is said that Nakano instructed her sister Yuko to cut off her head to prevent the Imperials from claiming her body as a trophy. Her sister agreed. Nakano's remains were later taken to Hokai Temple, where she is now buried beneath a pine tree. The Meiji imperial family ultimately won the war and took over Japan in 1868, which led to the Meiji Restoration period, bringing about major practical, political, and historical changes to Japan. One might say historical edits. It also brought about the destruction of the samurai class, and especially the tradition of warrior women. As is sadly common on our end of the globe, Westerners also rewrote the history of Japan with special attention to the contributions of the romanticized samurai, and often completely omitting the roles that the Onna-Bugeisha and the Onna-Bugeisha had in defending Japan's honor, which the Meiji imperial family likely supported. Despite broad belief that the Onna-Bugeisha's weak acknowledgement in history was due to female warriors being a rarity, this is instead most likely due to historical edits across the board. There have been numerous excavations of former battle sites across Japan showing that up to 30% of the deceased population from battles were women. Japanese warrior women existed. They were honorable and they were badass until the hands of history decided that they shouldn't be. So let it be known that these women were not a tale, not a fable or fiction. They were real and remarkable. And more importantly, they show us the indomitable power of women, especially in societies that often condition us to hear, "That's not for you." And having that knowledge, my friends, is more powerful than any battle knife ever wielded. Amber, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you wield your weapons of war with us today. You have been an incredible Onna-Bugeisha mama bear.
This was so fun. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope it's been helpful for your listeners.
I believe it has. Thank you again. If you enjoyed this episode and you have not already subscribed to our show, I encourage you to follow or subscribe on any places where you get your podcasts. If you have any questions or comments, you are welcome to send in an email to HERdacity@HERdacity.org. I will be sure to link the amazing resources that Amber shared in this episode, as well as that email in the show notes. And I hope that you tune in again next time. Until then, this was HERdacous. My name is Lorelei. Go out there and wield your weapons of war for good.